say that.
Hello there. We're on the air, and it's hockey night tonight. This is Champions and Challengers.
So cordy.
You know it. The cheesiest
You
of starts.
know it, buddy. Oh,
You know it,
hey.
buddy.
Let's just be as Canadian as possible, eh, bye? Oh, that's
I'm well aware of myself. Oh, dude, I got Newfie blood in me though. We're good. I'm still Kyle Snow.
I do too.
And with me, I have my usual sports aficionado, Ryan David Power.
Hello,
and
Internet.
because Chris is too busy having a girlfriend, which Ryan does not, we brought in special guest host Joseph Kendrick.
They call me that sometimes.
Complete with girlfriend.
Complete with girlfriend?
Well, if he was mentioning that I didn't have one, I'm pretty sure you do. Or you're married, aren't you?
He's married,
I'm married.
isn't he? Yeah.
Oh man,
She's no longer my girlfriend. I still date my wife, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's different.
It still happens regularly.
it has to.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fair.
Otherwise, those things fail. You have to.
Which
occasionally-
turns out that date night's usually at midnight.
Yeah, my relationship has largely been the same.
For those
We're
who
not
don't
talking about
know,
sports anymore. This is gonna be a relationship cast.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Joey Kendrick here is a member of the VHL, the Victory Hockey League, a community we discussed in some of our previous videos. And he's been joining us for a couple of editions here. We're going to do some sports, which I know.
The rundown on me.
Go ahead.
Everyone has their background profile. I am a Devils fan, so sports. I'm also a fan of various other teams in different leagues. But yeah, I mostly am a Devils fan. I'm originally from New Jersey area as a kid. But I hate sports. That's pretty much the end of it. But they brought me along just for the ride.
Sports. Grumpy Old Man.
Can't stand
Grumpy
Have you
old.
ever seen that movie? And its
Grumpy Old
sequel?
Man?
Yeah, Grumpy Old Man, I believe it's called.
No.
Isn't that a movie with man?
Old men with friends?
No, it's not a
Country for Old
sports
Men?
movie. Grumpy Old Men, 1993. 65% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I was 2, Ryan.
Oh. Is a thing.
Yeah.
That was 5. It was a family comedy about old men who are grumpy and tell people to get off their lawn. But
It was a popular show for 5-year-olds, apparently.
Yeah.
It's a movie.
It was a little bit much for me. At 2, I was too busy watching.
I don't know. As a kid, people had VHSs laying around. I popped them in. I saw a lot of things that were not appropriate for children. That was appropriate for children. But anyway, Kyle, go ahead. Let's sports it up.
All right. So if you haven't been living under a rock, you know that the NHL playoffs is going on right now. We have just started the second round. As of time of recording, we are half of the series are one game in. The other half have not yet begun, although one starts in about 45 minutes, and that's the one that Ryan cares about. But we'll get there.
I care about a lot of series right now.
Yeah.
I'm surprised how much my fandom has shifted. Not my overall fandom, obviously, cheering for the Caps, but
I couldn't tell about the jersey.
We'll get into that.
Yeah.
To be accurate, though, it was the Western Conference series that started yesterday, and the Eastern Conference series.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't realize.
Alternate each day, which I think is a weird way to do it. I kind of would have been better to see a West and an East team each day, but
sure,
that's how they want to do it.
Yep. So what we'll end up doing in this cast is we're going to recap the results of the first round and give quick predictions for the second round. Obviously, that'll take a lot less time because there's half as many of them. But I don't believe that any series have been finished the last time we did one of these. So I think that we're good to cover.
No, we started just at the beginning of last week. So when we last recorded the first round playoffs, none had been finished. There was a couple teams on the verge of being swept.
Yes.
But nothing was finalized yet.
That is correct. So we'll start with Nashville and Chicago. Blackhawks turned out to not show up for this playoffs as they were swept 4-0 by the Nashville Predators.
It's honestly not. I saw 2 of those games in completion and saw highlights of the other 2. It just wasn't a case of Chicago not showing up as much as it was Pekka Rinne is in form. He is in form. He was for that series especially. And Nashville's offense was flowing good, but it's not. I don't feel like Crawford really let Chicago down as much as it was just one of those series where it was clear that I think Chicago was not going to win, especially early. Very impressive by Nashville. This instantly made me excited for this a Nashville playoff run, by the way, I should say. Not just for PK Subban, who was traded to that team, but this season. But Nashville's a team has often been one of those teams that couldn't get over a playoff hump, and it's nice to see them not only win so dominantly in the first round, but win against a team that I thought I think many people were pegging as this team could easily go to the finals. Right? This is Chicago we're talking about. This is one of the teams. So upsetting the order, if you will.
Yep.
Well, that's just. I mean, when it comes to teams like Nashville, it's good to see them do well, and the reason for that is if someone was to present you with two teams, one of them being an expansion team from 1999, and the other being a team that you don't dislike, but you don't. They've been there so many times. For me, that's the Rangers. I can't stand seeing them keep going because they're always in the playoffs. Same with Detroit. However, when you see Nashville, you're like, okay, I'd love to see the expansion team. It's the same with the Blue Jackets. I would like to see the Wild, but the Wild have kind of had some shitty luck too. And
spoilers. I'm kidding, of course.
Well, no, I'm talking years past too. I mean, like you just want to see the expansion team succeed because you think that the league is better that way, and obviously Bettman does too, even though he's a little rat. I think seeing Nashville advance is good, and to knock off one of those teams that has been in the playoffs so many years in the Blackhawks, it's just good to see, and to sweep them, even more impressive. So I like seeing it too, and I think there's some players on Nashville that everyone likes to see. There's some that they don't. James Neal, and I think for the majority, you'd probably find them rooting for Nashville against any other team in the West now.
Shout out to Nashville captain, most underrated captain in the NHL, in my opinion, Mike Fisher.
Yes,
Mike Fisher.
Very good depth player, very good defensive player.
He's got a very underrated wife too.
I was just about to say he has a very hot wife.
He
I'm not much of a country singer.
He's married to Carrie Underwood, for those who don't know. But
what?
Yeah,
I thought it was Carrie Fisher.
Oh, too soon.
Sorry.
It's okay.
She's technically
Rest in
Carrie
peace,
Fisher.
It's okay. We'll continue to CGI create people for years to come, so they'll never be out of our memories.
Doing it for Tupac for years. So.
Or our hearts.
Yep.
I've been seeing Michael Jackson concert every year.
Impressive for Nashville, though, for sure.
Yeah.
Sucks that it couldn't happen when Trotz was with the team. I'm not a big Laviolette fan, but that team is good. There's a good team there.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder why that is.
Give me a second, guys.
Yes, of course. Special guest. Pepper.
Is the dog's name Pepper?
That is the. Oh yeah, haven't you heard?
That's awesome.
Past cast, Ryan always has to yell like
Pepper's probably a fan of the Predators.
Pepper is a fan of the Predators. I think we can confirm, right, Ryan?
Actually,
yeah, Pepper is a fan of the Nashville Predators.
Before we keep going, I should probably mention
Predator herself. Yeah,
I should mention I have 5 jerseys in my closet. One of them is a Predators jersey from 1999. The other is a Washington Capitals Mike Green jersey.
Okay, I'm going to guess the player that you have from 1999 in the Predators. Any ideas, Kyle? Let's think about this.
Dude, no, I'm not going to know.
Steve Sullivan.
No.
Shit, was that a good guess at least? I'm out of guesses.
Yeah, long-standing Predator. Yeah, that's a good guess.
Yeah, I was trying to think of who else was in the Predators in 1999.
I think he has the record for most games as a Predator.
Wow, let's Google that.
While you're Googling that, Ryan, I also have one jersey in my closet, which is a Canucks jersey, as I am a Canucks fan.
I know who it is.
It's not a player jersey, but do you know who signed it?
Yes, I do.
Who signed it?
So I'm going to say it's a Ryan Kessler jersey signed by Kevin Biesca.
It's not. There's no. No, that would be hilarious. There's no name on the jersey. It was
it's unnamed. Okay.
Yeah, it's an unnamed jersey.
Signed by Mark Messier.
Okay, so you're telling me right now that your jersey, by the way, Kendrick, David Legwand.
Yeah, that's who it is.
Yeah, nice player.
I have a Legwand jersey. I don't think they existed, but I have one.
He was a good player for his time.
Yeah,
depth guy.
He was a
grinder.
good second-line center.
For the record, though, both of you were wrong about who signed it. And in fact, if you follow this line of thinking, you'll continue to be wrong. It was not a skater. It was former assistant coach Rick Bowness.
I was gonna say Luongo, but your favorite
Rick
player.
Bowness. Didn't he go on to Arizona after that?
I don't know so after the disasterful 2010 playoff run, Or was it 2011? I don't remember. After that year, there was a charity event held in.
Believe me, I know it's 2011.
Yeah,
All right, well.
I suppose you would know. For those who don't know,
Bonus for those who don't know, according to Wikipedia here, which is obviously a used source, he's played for multiple teams as a player. The Atlanta Flames, Detroit Red Wings, St. Louis Blues, and Winnipeg Jets. Jets, they're the Jets. Jets. He was a head coach of the Winnipeg Jets, the Boston Bruins, Ottawa Senators, New York Islanders, and an associate coach with the Vancouver Canucks. Currently, he's an associate coach for the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Oh, wow. It's a better team than Arizona.
He left Vancouver and went right to Tampa. But before, to Kendrick's point, before Vancouver, he was an assistant coach with Bob Francis for the Coyotes for a bit there.
Mm-hmm.
Until he's had multiple tenures with them. He even coached with Gretzky. That was a bad time to coach in Arizona.
Yep,
I would have to agree.
Okay,
but yeah, next series. Just to wrap up, there was a charity event that the Bruins and also Rick Bowness for some reason was at, and I got him to sign my jersey, and he was very, very nice because my sister was working that event, so I got tickets. It was cool. Next series, St. Louis Blues took a 4-1 win over the Minnesota Wild.
I feel like this is another example of a series where you go, oh, this is a team that hasn't been able to get over the playoff hump against a team that you think could give them a problem. And they either need to show up or not show up. And just like Nashville, St. Louis showed up. They said no. And early goaltending performances were a big reason, but the offense was also humming. Lots of different contributors, too. Got to give a shout out to who I think was the best player of the series, Magnus Pajod. Rated guy. He scored a couple big overtime goals, was a big offensive contributor for them for the series. So
nice.
That's my spiel there.
Yeah. Also, I remember you earlier on in the series praising Jake Allen's performance.
In the first couple games, Allen was stellar.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to show up for every game, but if you can steal a couple games by yourself, that's.
Stealing games on the road, especially, those are big.
Yep.
Here's my strange take on this series. Now this series was weird to me because I predicted the Wild to win, and the reason I predicted the Wild to win wasn't necessarily the regular season success. It was more so the fact that they sold off Shattenkirk at the deadline. The Blues did. So I had figured that the Blues were in selling mode, and they were actually just kind of not really happy to be in the playoffs to begin with because it looked like, I don't know, maybe the general manager did not want this team to actually succeed, which is why he sold them off. But then, through my knowledge of following the NHL for so many years, I figured out that obviously selling Shattenkirk was the only thing they could do because of his contract and because it was expiring, and who knows what the fuck happens in the future for him. But I thought the Wild were just going to walk over the Blues because, one, Shattenkirk's selling them off. I thought they were in rebuilding mode, and two, were we gonna see Jake Allen of years past, where Jake Allen is too young and he doesn't actually figure his shit out? Or were we going to see a good Jake Allen? And Jericho touched on it earlier, or Kyle, because we're on this. Kyle said Jake Allen was great, and he was. I mean, I think he stole. That was another case where it wasn't a case of the Wild sucking. I think it was a Jake Allen performance like Pekka Rinne that kind of stole. Those were the two series that kind of were defined by who was in net for the team that won. And I mean, segue there, they both kind of meet up now and played last night, I think. They did?
Yeah, they did.
And I guess we'll cover that now that we're here, Kyle. We don't need to go through all the first round here.
No, that's fine.
But we'll kind of, because it's a natural segue.
Mm-hmm.
What a game. I watched the highlights of that after the fact, but I also caught some of the first and second. You were wondering if, now that they've made some noise, when would PK Subban really come alive? What a fantastic game one for PK Subban. He should have had 2 goals, but one deflected in front of the net. Just Ovechkin-like goals over there by the circle, one-timer. There's 3 goals scored that way. One was credited to Subban. One went off a stick in front of the net and was deflected. And then the third one hit the goalie, and Philip Forsberg got the rebound. All by the dynamism of timer, and we've all known that he's just as capable as Ovechkin when it comes to. He might even have surpassed Ovi now in terms of the best one-timer in the league. And you wondered when he was going to make his impact. He looked great last night. He was skating good too. So a goal and 2 assists for him. It was a fantastic game.
I don't
Nashville, I think, I'm going for them this whole playoff from the West too. By the way, for those who don't know at this point, I'm going for Nashville at this point.
I don't think I've ever heard you say Philip Forsberg without saying fucking in front of it.
I am not one of those people who usually critiques the Philip Forsberg trade as hard. It wasn't a good trade, but at the same time, we don't have room for Forsberg in our lineup anyway. He would have been traded. Like, who would he replace?
Eventually, yes.
Maybe we wouldn't have got Oshie, but then I would have been mad because no offense to Philip Forsberg, but I like TJ Oshie better.
They're both streaky.
They're both, but I think Oshie works harder. Oshie's one of the hardest working true scorers. He does what that top line needs more than Forsberg.
We'll get to Washington when we get to Washington, gentlemen. Let's
transition.
Nashville does lead 1-0 in that series, though.
Yeah. They won 4-3, I believe it was, in that first game. They were up early in the game, and St. Louis forced the tie, but Nashville ended up scoring. Vernon Fiddler, I believe it was, scored in the later parts of the third period there to seal the game.
Longtime Predator.
Yeah.
Has gone
you
to
have
Dallas.
his jersey? No.
I do not know. I don't have a Vernon Fiddler jersey yet.
Jeez, get your shit together, Kendrick.
But NHL.com has it on sale, so.
In terms of prediction for this series, Kyle, at this point, it wouldn't shock me to see Nashville sweep St. Louis.
Jeez,
like the way they're playing. Even when their goalie isn't there, the offense shows up. And Rene didn't have a bad game. I mean, it's a tight game, 4-3. So
perfect. Kendrick, do you have a prediction for this series? We'll attribute it to Chris next week, and if anything you get wrong, we'll just shit talk Chris for it.
I see this series as similar to what Ryan said, but I think it'll be a 5-game series, and I think Nashville win 4-1, and that's just because I don't like to ever throw out a sweep comment unless I know for sure that the stacks are fully against the team. I don't know if Jake Allen will show up or not, but I'm kind of calling it on he will show up one game.
Game 2, defend home ice a little, and then get sweat, and then finish it off. Yeah.
Yeah, so I see Nashville advancing in 5.
Fair enough. Moving on to Anaheim-Calgary. This was a series that the Ducks had a handy start did very well to begin it, and they also ended it very well. They also swept the Calgary Flames.
Thank God. That's all I can say is thank God.
Yeah. I know that everyone who watches this who's Canadian is going to sit there and be like, aren't you from Alberta? Aren't you from Red Deer?
Yeah. Ryan, you've lived in Calgary. You're not a Flames fan, but
I hate most Canadian teams.
He's a Red Deer Rebels fan.
No. Not because of the teams, but because Canadian fans, a lot of them are very, very egotistical. They talk about their teams regardless of even looking at the league. And again, we live in Canada, so there are casual sports people for hockey more so than in the United States because it's a bigger sport here. And it's just the amount of times just chatting with someone and someone go, well, I'm going for that Calgary. They're good this year. Have you even watched a game? And then they get mad at you when you say their opinion's wrong.
Hold on.
And you're like, but I watch hundreds of games a year. You don't watch none. And then you go, well, they made the playoffs this year, so they're going all the way. And you're like, get out. I'm happy to see that
16 out of 30 teams make it.
Get it out. Everyone knew Anaheim was the better team. Get it done with fast. Calgary actually played good in a lot of those games too. That's the heartbreaker. Calgary gave up leads. They were leading against Anaheim, but then Anaheim would come back and steal the game. And seeing all the sad faces made me laugh a little. But I feel bad a little for the Calgary fans because they have a good young team, and their team's going to get better, much like Edmonton, much like a lot of other teams in the league, Canadian teams. But getting swept, no matter what, getting swept leaves a sour taste in your mouth. It makes you want to see.
I'm going to expose the Flames here because, come on. No one saw this coming. The Flames defense is aging, and I think their window is actually closing. Let's be honest. Giordano, TJ Brody are 2, 3, maybe 4-year wonders. And then after that, they're not going to succeed with that. Coupled with a young D that only includes Dougie Hamilton, who I don't know if anyone saw that series and saw Dougie Hamilton make one good play besides, I think, maybe one goal where he went towards the net and tipped it in as a defender. Now he's out of position. But
the PK Subban approach.
Hey, no, if
Pretty
a
much.
defender's going to be out of position, then they better skate like PK Subban.
They better
Hell,
score.
even Nate Schmidt, the seventh defenseman of the Capitals, is better at being out of position than Dougie Hamilton. Because if
Good
you're
old
going to do it, you
number
got to be able to get back there.
Nate Schmidt, the number 88 in your heart, the only number 88 you remember.
Yeah.
I think he's number 88. What the fuck?
He is.
You don't even remember.
Correct. He's number 88. He has the
thought
puck
so.
a lot. To be honest.
But I think you'll see
That's
this
the player
Calgary
for this
window
game.
close. Yeah, and the reason why you're going to see this Calgary window close, and that's like it's not an asinine comment, trust me. That forward group is great, and they're going to, like, Monahan, Bennett, Goudreau, whoever the fuck else they got. Troy Brouwer, but his window is going to close too.
I felt like he was closing even after we ditched him to St. Louis.
Sadly, I love Troy
for
Brouwer.
TJ Oshie too, no less. Which steal of a deal for us.
Well, yeah, it feels like everyone's trading with St. Louis. The Calgary Flames forward group is going to look great, but something tells me they're going to run into a little Edmonton Oilers approach in the future here, where they don't have defense, and they neglected to draft defense as well as what do you call it, a goaltender. I think you need one of those. And but one of the players, like, didn't Chris Russell get shipped off to Dallas last year, and they got like Yorkie Paka or something in return? And where the hell is he?
Their trades have been suspect.
Weird. And I think
they felt they shored up the defense with Hamilton, but Hamilton doesn't really play defense.
He doesn't.
If you're going to have that, you need a pairing partner with him to clean that up.
Indeed.
Dougie Hamilton does not know how to skate on his frame. Like, he's like 6'6", 6'7" or something, and he just you can put the puck in between his legs and go around him like a pylon, and he just reminds me of Hal Gill.
I was just about to say Hal Gill.
I think
How about Jeff Schultz? Just there's a few number of very tall but players who don't use their body, and they try to get by on positioning, but they
Commissaric.
Yeah,
so
lots of players.
I think I saw this one coming, and plus the Ducks are a playoff. Like, we know they're a playoff built for the playoffs. It's one of those engine that's built for the playoffs, and that's why you saw Corey Perry suck all year. But then in the playoffs, it's a different story because they know how to play there. Now, Corey Perry didn't. It's not like he made up for it in the playoffs yet, but it's different. It's a different animal, and I think I said this before the playoffs even started in the NHL, was that you're going to see, like. And to credit to him, McDavid, you don't know what he's going to react like in the playoffs because it's a different story. You get away with so much more. And Goudreau's a pussy. Sorry, but he is a pussy. And if you touch him, he will get mad, and he's got rage. I don't know if you guys saw that in that series, but anytime someone touched Goudreau, he'd turn around and like passively try to like do something, but he wouldn't because he's too much of a little bug. But Calgary was going to lose this series no matter what. I kind of saw Anaheim winning, and I'll still always call them the Mighty Ducks regardless, even though they're not the Mighty Ducks.
Just to Kendrick's point, talking about how a player like Corey Perry might not have really redeemed himself. When Kendrick says he sucked during the regular season, he's talking about statistically. Though a big difference between experienced veterans like Corey Perry is even when they're not scoring on the scoreboard, they're not bad defensively. They played long enough. They played enough playoff hockey that when a guy like Dougie Hamilton isn't scoring, you notice it more because they're not doing anything else for you. And difference between a team built for the playoffs and a team not. And a young team like Calgary, like. If you shut down their stars, well, their stars need to shut down your players too, or they're in trouble.
Yeah,
and that's not what happened.
It's not mano a mano with those two because the teams like are totally built differently, and like you said, experience. I think experience will rule everything. That's why I love Dan Cleary. I love guys like Troy Brouwer. I like Patrick Eaves. Those are all playoff guys. Like, no, they don't stand out, and you're not going to grab them from a fantasy aspect, but you're wanting them for the playoffs, and they are built differently than a guy like Goudreau, who will get you 80 points during a year. So I could see this Calgary team failing from the get-go, and I'm not all that bright, but that was the one thing that I kind of forecasted.
On the flip side of that, though, you want to talk about a young team that showed up for the first time in the playoffs and beat a more experienced team. Let's talk about the Edmonton Oilers and the San Jose Sharks.
I'm actually going to lump this series in with the with the Washington-Toronto series in a way, because for me,
Yes.
Toronto and Edmonton share a lot of similarities in that they're young teams that really excelled, and a lot of people are looking and wondering why other young teams like a Calgary, for example, oh well, why aren't they doing as good? Key difference, and I'm going to state this as loudly as I can: coaching. Look at the coaching on Edmonton and Toronto. Who is coaching Edmonton? Todd McLellan, former Sharks coach who took them to the finals. They let him go inexplicably because their roster of veterans weren't showing up and they were trying to send messages. Make no mistake about it, McLellan's a good coach. Look at the coach in Toronto, Mike Babcock. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Took the team from 30th to playoffs in one season.
How about more? Won how many cups with the Red Wings? Won how many Olympic gold medals? This is a guy who gets building teams for playoff hockey. And the same goes for Todd McLellan. Both Toronto and Edmonton might have been young, but go beyond that top 6 forward group and you start noticing similarities. Bigger, experience, depth, playoff guys. And, you talk about Edmonton versus Calgary here. That when Edmonton traded Taylor Hall, they traded him to New Jersey for Adam Larson. Adam Larson showed up huge in the playoffs, and not just offensively. One of the big differences between a player like Dougie Hamilton and Adam Larson is a better two-way player. They were getting a player who could help them in the playoffs, and I think Larson did great against San Jose in the playoffs. There was a lot of key players on San Jose that struggled, and some of that is due to their age. They have a few older veterans like a Marlowe, like a Thornton, but it was also because I think that a lot of people saw that Edmonton was ready to play defense. McDavid wasn't really that highlight reel, but he was playing a lot more defense himself. Again, I feel Todd McLellan had that whole team understanding this is the playoffs. We're not looking for stats. We're looking to win, and you got to do what you got to do to win. And that's what happens when you get experienced people behind the bench of a young team. Now they're learning the ropes. I don't know how good Edmonton's going to be in the next series. They're up 1-0 for the record over Anaheim. In what was a very good game, a good back and forth, but they're not going to, I don't know if they're going to keep the momentum as much as they did against San Jose, but really impressive. And the Oilers team faced adversity in that series too. Let's not forget there was a 7-0, was it slacking that San Jose did when they showed up. The Oilers responded. So yeah.
The Oilers did win the first series against the Sharks.
I can't actually believe I'm saying it because because of the biased Canadian fan perspective, but I'm cheering for Edmonton at this point. I think that this is the type of experience that McDavid needs. I don't know if they go deep, maybe they do, but even going another round is enough that's going to teach that team a lot, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is funny because the like you said, the first game has been played, and look who showed up. It was Edmonton, and look who was the star of that game. It was Adam Larson, former Devil. The reason why I, Devils fan, did not necessarily, I didn't really agree with the Edmonton fans saying, "Oh my God, we gave up Taylor Hall for some Larson kid." It's like, well, he's no slouch. I didn't see that trade as I saw it straight up as a 1-for-1 trade, and I thought it was actually good value for both teams. Which, sure enough, Adam Larson scored 2 goals last night in Edmonton's winner against Anaheim, who I said before was a playoff team, whereas Edmonton is being built that way. Another guy we should mention is Letestu, who had 2 goals last night. He is one of those playoff guys that you want, like the aforementioned Dan Cleary, Patrick Eaves, Troy Brower. Those are guys.
Justin Williams. You could just keep listing.
Justin Williams. Yeah, I mean, you need those guys to compete, and Edmonton has a bunch of them. I don't think that they will win the cup, but I do think that there's a reason they went on and Toronto stayed behind. But I do agree with the whole coaching aspect. I think that you have a coach that knows what he's doing, not only in the regular season, Bruce Boudreau, playoffs.
Shots fired at Boudreau.
Hey,
Boudreau will never listen.
He doesn't listen.
He'll never listen to this podcast.
I'll tweet it at him.
Listen, we'll get. Listen, we need to cover it in barbecue sauce.
We need to get Boudreau on this podcast, actually.
I'm only kidding, Boudreau. Remember 24/7. There were scenes where he was doing interviews just covered in like rib sauce. You're like, you couldn't use a napkin.
Yeah.
So our guest list now includes Keith David and then Bruce Boudreau.
We'll get them both on the same show. But
Carrie Underwood on too. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Sure.
You know how underrated Mike Fisher is as a captain. Seriously, his leadership skills in Nashville.
Ryan's just gonna suck Fisher's dick for an hour and block her.
He was one of those players. Whenever I be a GM when I was playing like NHL games on console, I would always make sure I grab Mike Fisher in my third line. How would you not?
Kyle,
Sorry.
bold statement, but you'd probably suck his dick too if you got Carrie Underwood's podcast. It's like a combo.
I'd have to see the dick first.
Okay, well, I'm done with this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking
To put you both on the spot, who do you guys think wins this series?
I think Edmonton wins in 7 in a fun series, and I think it sets up a really awesome Western Conference final, amazing good series between a young Edmonton team learning the ropes and a Nashville team ready to finally win.
Bold. Kendrick?
I mean, this is a harder series than normal. I was going to give the Jeff Daniels response and say whatever he said on that newsroom show. I'm going to think the game winner is going to be scored by Silverberg in over. That's my really specific prediction.
Overly specific prediction. I'm on board with it. Moving over to the other side of the country.
With the East Coast, we already had talked about the Washington-Toronto one, and Ryan actually alluded to it earlier when saying that coaching and he'd lump them up together, and I was actually going to do the same thing because I think this is kind of like a carbon copy. It's just a different conference. Toronto was built with young guys with skill, and which is what Edmonton has been built with now, but Edmonton has a little bit more sandpaper, as Don Cherry would say. Toronto, the thing about Toronto is you name a defenseman on their team, and if it's not Morgan Rielly, then you are too invested in the Maple Leafs because that's the only defender that really matters over there in my mind, and that's the reason why they weren't going to shut down the Caps.
Yeah, if you mirror, it's funny those series, the Edmonton Shark series and the Washington Toronto series, because I feel like the storylines were very similar in both series. Sharks, much like the Capitals, a team that's never really been able to get over the playoff hump, facing a young team that's well coached. That, as Kendrick said, a lot of skill up front, but a little bit of grit. I'd argue that Toronto had some playoff grit in the forward perspective. You talk Brian Boyle, you talk Matt Martin, like there's players on that roster, but the defense was the big difference. I feel like after Morgan Rielly, I can't count the number of times I saw Jake Gardiner making mistakes on the back end. And let's not kid ourselves. Connor Carrick was a starting defender who ate up decent minutes for the Toronto Maple Leafs. We traded him to them because he's ninth on how deep Washington is from a defense perspective. So it just that at some point something had to give. I felt like once the early games were shaky for Washington in that series, but we started to play our game. Toronto's goalie and their overall team was still able to hang in the games, but there's a reason they all went to overtime, and our winners needed to show up, and they were the type of people we talk about. Like Justin Williams had an overtime winner and showed up in key situations. It was what it needed to be. Closer series than I probably would have liked and I initially predicted, but yeah.
Plus, Kadri doesn't move on, and that's all right with me.
Yeah, for the record, too, Washington did win 4-2, but 5 out of those 6 games, I believe, went to overtime.
And I'm sure there's an overtime tonight coming. I'm pretty sure.
Probably is.
Probably. Ryan's gonna be late for Dungeons and Dragons.
Speaking of the next series that connects to the series, Pittsburgh beat Columbus in 5 games, and I thought it was kind of a stunner how quickly Pittsburgh. That's what
Quickburg.
Quickburg Penguins Pittsburgh their way through Columbus. I thought this series would be longer. I thought it would be 7, and I actually had to go into Columbus. I thought Bobrovsky would be a bigger difference. I thought the weakness in net, especially with Matt Murray out, I thought Fleury hasn't been battle tested in a while, but he showed up. He obviously pride on the line. He decided to show up, and the offense of Pittsburgh just couldn't be stopped. That's really what it came down to. And Columbus was a little weaker on defense. They're not bad on defense, but not as heavy as even like a team like Washington, for example. There is some younger holes there. Yeah, Columbus lost pretty fast.
Okay, so I said playoff experience matters. Throw that out the window when we're talking about Marc-Andre Fleury, because in the past, yes, playoff experience matters, but in the last few years, we haven't seen Marc-Andre Fleury as Flower, the guy that the Penguins drafted as their first round selection. I think it was like 04, 05.
Yes.
So so what I said earlier just doesn't. We won't put it towards Marc-Andre Fleury, which is why I think a lot of people thought going into this series that Pittsburgh would not be walking over the Blue Jackets, because obviously the goaltender is the one thing that is the biggest talking head with these two things. And then Bobrovsky, I mean, how many people would pick Bobrovsky over Marc-Andre Fleury this year to start their season?
Weren't those the two goalies who had that ridiculous series? I think it was Pittsburgh-Philadelphia, that all the games were like 10-8 or something like that.
Yeah.
I think Bobrovsky played some of those games. So did Michael Leighton.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they might have even also had Ray Emery at that time too. Actually, like I think Pittsburgh had, or sorry, that was the time when Philadelphia had no goalie, so they were just constantly cycling through.
They also had Brizgalov, but I'm not sure what point that was.
Why do you have to be mad?
There was a period because no goalie was doing it for them. They were constantly switching the position.
There was a time when Philadelphia had Robert Esch, so everything kind of. Philadelphia is a different story, different animal. But I think when it comes to Pittsburgh, everyone was thinking, well, what's going to go on with the goaltending? Because, like, some people didn't even know that Murray was injured. So they thought going into this series that Murray was the one that was going to carry this team through. And people thought, okay, Pittsburgh's going to beat Columbus, but it's going to be a close contest. You stuff in Marc-Andre Fleury, and people are like, okay, well, then Columbus is going to win in 6. But when Fleury decides, hey, I've been the man in the shadows all year because of Murray, I think I'll try to get out of that. And he did. But, of course, the story of this series is actually Pittsburgh's depth. You had multiple guys like, I think, Sheary, Rust, Knackle, bunch of guys that just kind of like rose. And how many people even know those guys' names before last year? Those are guys that are.
Some of those guys stepped up. Their AHL guys really started to evolve to make up some of their roster for sure.
Yeah. So Washington, Pittsburgh.
Starts tonight. Put you both in the spot. Ryan, in like 10 minutes, actually, I believe is when they start. But so Ryan, I know you've been memeing about it.
I legitimately actually do. I legitimately do actually think Washington in 7.
Oh, really?
I mean, it's easy to crap on the Capitals, but having no faith in them is just me not having faith in them as a fan because they never show up and they're never good.
I think they do have to play better than they did in the Toronto series, though.
I think there were points in that Toronto series where it's easy to let. I say this all the time. It's easy to let the Capitals show you why you shouldn't believe in them, and forget that that's the reason you're not believing in them. That's always been the case in the past few seasons, especially for the Caps in the playoffs, but this year even particularly. And the Caps aren't going to lose to Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh beat the Caps. If the Caps lose to Pittsburgh, it's because the Caps let Pittsburgh beat the Caps. The Caps are a better team than a lot of other teams, and that's always been their mantra, is that when they mismanage their puck possession, they lose. But they're going to get the puck possession. That's just the way they play. We're too structured. And we were like that against Pittsburgh this season. Pittsburgh's a great team, and they beat us last year. But I really think, the Fleury factor, he was good against Columbus, a Columbus team that doesn't have the offensive players that we have. When you start seeing barrage of shift after shift, and we do this against the Leafs, we do this against everyone. The Capitals turn Harlem Globetrotter on people. They will own the puck for 7 straight minutes in the offensive zone until they get a goal. Like, that is the type of way that can be the way they play. That's a lot harder to go up against than a Columbus team where you're trading chances, or where they're worried more about defense or forechecking, or you're scoring goals against them, right? And then you also factor in power play. I don't know. We'll see. For me, the big determining factor in why I give this to Washington 7 and not Pittsburgh is Chris Letang's still out. Our defense should make a difference at some point. With how deep we are on forward, at a certain point, all the banging around. And then I also add to the fact that I think because we had a more harder battle-tested first playoff series, the Caps are now more ready and geared to go than Pittsburgh, who might be, not as fierce because their series wasn't as intense.
That is true. Kendrick, your opinion?
I think Caps in 7 too, but mine more. I don't think, as much as I was praising him, I don't think Andre Fleury can keep it up for another series. I I'm you guys know me as a devil's advocate. I will always think the worst when it comes to that, and when it comes to a player and his production, until he proves me that he can do it over more than a month span, and for some cases, when it comes to draft picks, 3-year span. So I don't think Fleury can keep it up.
Fair
So
enough.
I think Caps in 7.
Fair enough.
I love how we say Fleury can't keep it up, and that's still Caps in 7.
Yeah.
That's
Well, there's other players in
the
that
Caps
team.
in the playoffs for you.
That's true.
Yeah, Caps are doing it. It's more so the Pens.
It's too bad that Chris isn't here for the next series. Montreal ended up losing to the New York Rangers in 6 games. I know that the big stat was they only scored 11 goals over those 6 games, so you can't expect Carey Price to win every game for you. And in fact, he won't. Lundqvist had a pretty fantastic series, but I'll let you guys take it from there.
He won't win 4 of them.
Go ahead.
Yeah, he'll lose 4 out of the 6 games because nobody's.
I'll just give a brief. I didn't see as much games of this series. The little I did see of it, though, one of the big things that matters in the playoffs more than the regular season, and you see this in pretty much every other game, defenseman points, defenseman scoring, because it turns out that teams and coaches focus a lot more on your goal scorers during the playoffs, which is why goal scoring is always down. That and goaltenders play better. But that usually also means that defensemen who can skate, who can get the puck on net and get that open ice are far more valuable in the playoffs, because those chances are more prevalent, because those are from a defensive perspective, those are the chances that you have to give up, where it's someone farther from the net looking for bodies and deflections, and you're just trying to keep it from getting to the net. That's generally a lot of the scoring chances in the playoffs. And I think that the loss of PK Subban ended up being a big thing for Montreal, a bigger thing than they're probably willing to admit.
Yeah, probably shouldn't have traded them.
There was something to their game for me every time I looked in that just wasn't clicking. And, one of the big things, obviously, lack of goal scoring. You were talking about it, Kyle. Carey Price can't do everything. Max Pacioretty continues to not be a factor in the playoffs. And I know from Chris's perspective, it'll probably hurt to see, he's not a big fan of this player and he was happy to see him traded, but David Desharnais had a couple of clutch goals with Edmonton.
Chris did hate on him pretty hard
in the playoffs. And I feel like that's something that always happens, regardless of whether or not he plays amazing in the playoffs. Desharnais is one of those players that I recall in previous Montreal playoff runs, he finds himself on the score sheet and pivotal points. And you're like, what is this? What is that? There's a continuing factor here. So I don't know. Sucks for Montreal. I was going for them in the series, but Lundqvist and the Rangers are, they're a playoff battle team. They're playoff tested. They kind of flew under the radar to me, New York. I still don't really treat them as a serious playoff threat because they've been deep before, but there's a lot of question marks still on that team, and but
they are. But they also
they were able to beat Montreal. So
yeah, they also aren't necessarily facing the hardest of opponents in the next round. But I'll let Kendrick give his opinions on this one before we get to that.
I just think Chris Kreider is such a great player, and Habs fans should really like him. He's like the best player in the NHL. Let's be honest. I'm gonna get flagged.
Sorry, Ovechkin.
Listen, I agree. I completely agree that Chris Kreider is the best running back in the NHL.
He is the best running back. He just powers through the hole, and then if you trip him, he'll fall into your defensive line. It's the best played sports. I saw the Habs winning this series actually in 7, but that was because I didn't see Lundqvist as Henrik Lundqvist of old. I saw him as Henrik Lundqvist of maybe partly a shell of himself, and he showed that in the first 3 games that he wasn't Henrik Lundqvist, but he showed up in the end of it that he was Henrik Lundqvist, and the usual Henrik Lundqvist that we see is, I have a quote of how many times I have to say Henrik Lundqvist in a paragraph. I think he's he's Henrik Lundqvist of old, where he's just stealing games and he's a Vezina finalist. So I don't know. I'm not surprised that they won, but I kind of thought the Habs would win this. But with goal scoring always being the issue in Montreal, it's a little predictable.
And they can't blame Radulov either. He had a good playoffs.
No, and
Radulov had a good playoffs. I really wondered where was the Shea Weber factor too. I thought he would be more of a factor in the playoffs, defensively, offensively, whatever. I don't.
I mean, you brought it up earlier. PK Subban's foot speed is the reason why this team couldn't do anything. Because let's be honest, PK Subban, whether you hate him or not, is a fast player, and he activates the D core. And if you don't have that, because Shea Weber's not going to give you that. He's going to give you sturdy defense. He's going to give you
Hard shot.
a hard shot, but he's not mobile like PK Subban. And that's the problem Montreal had, is they couldn't activate their D because you have an old Markov. You have an Alexei Emelin who doesn't know where he's supposed to be playing. It's obvious. Like, it's obvious. You watch his game, you don't know. He obviously doesn't know positionally where to be. He'll time a good hit every once in a while, but he's not.
So he's reacting and reading on the fly as opposed to structure.
Exactly.
Okay.
So they move on and they get to face the winner of the Ottawa-Boston series,
which was Ottawa. They won in 6.
Yeah.
So you'll notice there's a trend here of me normally saying I hate Canadian teams, and then
you loved all of them.
Canadian teams,
all of them except for Calgary.
There's a reason. Who's coaching the Ottawa Senators? One of the most underrated coaches in the NHL. I have no idea why Tampa Bay got rid of him. Guy Boucher, sorry. Look at this guy. You need to Google this guy. Anyone who hasn't seen him, he looks like a Bond villain. The dude is awesome. And he's all class too. I saw an article the other day of after Ottawa beat Boston, they flew back home, and there were a bunch of fans, as usually there are, right, waiting for him.
He does look like a Bond villain.
Yeah, they were waiting for him. You're waiting for the team as they got off the plane. He pulls over, gets out of his car, and shakes all their hands. It's like 2 a.m. Then gets back in his car, drives away, says hi to all. You're just like, that's Canadian right there. That's what this is about. This isn't about money. That's, again, to a lot of traditional Canadian fans, as much as Don Cherry is a little too far to the crazy, there is an element of that we all kind of agree with. This is about the game. This isn't about the corporations and the money. It's about the fans, the game, the joy, and there are guys that get it. And then you just look at it from a structure perspective. Guy Boucher knows what he's doing. That Ottawa team is not built to go deep, but they're built to battle. Every game against them in the playoffs is going to be hard to beat them on. And they're another team that it's nice to see some players that were falling under the radar a little, and maybe some people have certain opinions on, who maybe not as effective, do pretty good. Dion Phaneuf had a really good series against Boston. He had some game-winning goals. He was mobile on the back end. He was given hits. He wasn't as good defensively as certain other players, but he's not an awful defensive player. Bobby Ryan, a guy that people have constantly challenged to show up, he showed up in that series against Boston. Craig Anderson was there, which is huge for them. They obviously had the cancer scare, or his wife earlier in the season, and he had to leave, and so he's playing for something, and it's good to see a team play for something. That's what it feels like is happening, and to me, that's exactly what you get from the type of coach like Guy Boucher. He knows how to get his players invested on top of all the structure. He knows how to get them playing. He knows playoff hockey, and definitely now I find myself cheering for Ottawa over New York. Kendrick mentioned it before, but you got the established team versus a team that's, Ottawa is established, but they're not as established as the Rangers, and it's been a while since a team like that's won, and I'm definitely going for Ottawa in this series.
Fair enough. Do you have a prediction for? Oh, sorry.
I don't know. There's something about.
Go ahead, Ken.
I think we're here. Yeah, you're still
your
here.
Your mic was a little weird. Yeah.
I was gonna say I just like seeing Chris Kelly do well, because I think no one knows who Chris Kelly is, but he was drafted by the Senators, I think, 14 years ago or something, and he's always been their 4th-line center, because their 3rd-line center for years was Mike Fisher. Chris Kelly went off and went to another team. I actually think he was in Boston and came back to Ottawa. And he's so underrated. He's another one of those guys. You lump him in with the Dan Clearys of the world, and you have yourself a playoff player. And he doesn't do anything exceptional, but he doesn't do anything wrong. And him and Ryan also mentioned Boucher. Boucher also has Mark Crawford behind him, and
it's a good bench.
Mark Crawford has done his tour of duty in the NHL as well as the Swiss League. Of course, this is the guy that was the head coach of Austin Matthews last season. He knows what he's talking about. This is a good team. This is a good coaching staff, and Craig Anderson shows up when he needs to, and it's good to see. It's good to see someone like that has some success, because Craig Anderson has also been one of those guys like Bobby Ryan that's been challenged. You got to do more. We expected big things of you in Colorado. You didn't do anything. We hope that you do something in Ottawa, and you just like to see him, because there's a reason he beat out Robin Lehner, and it's not because Robin Lehner's looks like he's a caveman. It's because Robin Lehner couldn't get up to the standards of Craig Anderson's clutch ability. Because I don't know if you know, but Craig Anderson does show up in big games.
That's a big factor for that position. That's the biggest factor.
Yeah, he may not. He's not gonna. You're not gonna sweep series with Craig Anderson, but he's gonna show up for games where you need him to be there. And I mean, the most underrated player in the NHL, Mark Mathot, coming back from an injury, he kind of made Boston. Boston kind of at the end of that series didn't do so bad. Got their 2 wins when they were down 3-1 or something.
Apologies for the technical difficulties, by the way.
Nothing, sorry,
internet on 3 different places in Canada.
Was actually doing for that series until Ottawa. What's that?
Oh, your mic was cutting in a little bit.
It's not really cutting. It's mostly that it speeds and slows down. So it's like you're talking in slow motion, and then you start talking really fast. I think
that's just my voice.
Yeah. No,
I talk.
No, I think
like a cartoon.
When it goes all technical, like I generally.
Yeah, well, actually, for those of you who don't know, Kendrick is 34% robot, so that's just that's him kicking in.
I'm also on the West Coast.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. We're all internet's all over the place here. Kendrick is on the far west.
It could rain here right away.
I'm in the West Coast, or not the West Coast, but the West, and Kyle is all the way on the East Coast. So
yeah, so I think Ottawa Rangers series. I mean, this one, I'm stealing Kyle's limelight here on introducing the next series, but
go for it.
I honestly think that the Rangers will dispose of Ottawa in 6, but I don't think Ottawa is a team that's going to go lightly. They never have been.
I'm gonna agree with that exact prediction. The Rangers are going to win this series. As much as I'm cheering for Ottawa, as much as I think there's so many storylines there. One storyline we forgot was, I don't remember the player's name, right off the top of my head. There was a player who came back from injury, and everyone thought his career was over, and scored a very, very big goal for Ottawa in the playoffs. But they didn't think he was ever going to come. Like people didn't even know if he was going to play. MacArthur, was it MacArthur?
Yeah, Clark MacArthur.
Clark MacArthur. That's who I thought it was, but I was trying to make sure. I'm like, didn't he get traded? Maybe I'm thinking of someone else. My apologies. It turns out there's lots of players in the NHL and lots of stories. But
no shit.
But it just add it to the list of just morale things that Ottawa had done in this playoffs run, that it's hard not to like that. It's hard not to be enjoyed by, to get enjoyment out of it. But the Rangers are a better team. The Rangers are going to go to the finals in 6 games. That covers
finals, of course.
Our playoff predictions completely, or the conference finals, yeah. But we'll just say this: what overtime craze! Like the parity in the NHL is at an all-time high. Oh my goodness!
Yes.
I don't remember the exact
series
number.
In the first round.
16 series in the first round went to overtime. Only 7 went to overtime from the first round last year. Like that's over double, and it's just going to continue. Like pretty much, I think every series had an overtime game, didn't it? Every single one?
Yeah.
Yeah,
yes.
Like the parity is high. Sure, you might even see teams get swept like we did, but they get swept in several games that went to overtime. Like these are close games.
Those could go either way.
Everywhere. And the playoffs has always been a time of bounces, but even more so when so many games are going to overtime.
It's true.
There was a particular bounce in the Washington-Toronto series where I believe it was in game number 6, the game the Leafs were eliminated. Austin Matthews got the first goal of the game off a wicked bounce that just went off the top of the glass right in front of the net, right to him with the goalie, when no other, like he was breaking into the zone and he had beaten everyone into the zone, but it didn't matter because the puck was dumped and just instantly right to him in front of the net, goal. And you're like, that's,
of course that happens.
The fact that can determine that can determine a series even.
Yeah.
With how close these games are. And that's when hockey's at its best, and a lot of people would say worst, because you really
depends
get
on which side you're on. Absolutely. I think that's going to do it for this edition of Champions Challengers. Yeah. But Ryan, as always, it's always a pleasure having you.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad to be here to talk hockey, and it was glad to have Kendrick too.
Yes. Thank you very much for joining us.
You provided great insight, Kendrick. You obviously know your hockey. David Leg One jersey, deep cut for all those fans out there.
Everyone loves David Leg One. He's the best
legend.
Yeah,
was he a captain? Is it a C? No, he wasn't a captain.
Oh, no A, no
It was
letter
the
at all?
99. I'm pretty sure the captain back then was what's his name? Tom Fitzgerald.
Of course, everyone knows Tom Fitzgerald.
No, research it. I'm pretty sure he was the first captain of the Predators. I could be wrong, but I thought it was
correct.
Tom Fitzgerald.
He is correct. Tom Fitzgerald was the first captain.
Yeah, there you go.
Tom
Yeah, there you go.
Fitzgerald.
Damn, look who knows his trivia. This is why we had to have a second analyst, because with Chris out, it would have just been like Ryan being like, I think this, and I would have been like, sure. And that would have been the whole cast.
Tom Fitzgerald played some time for the Capital District Islanders, which is a weird name.
They were the best team ever.
Finished his career in 2005-06, by the way, with the Boston Bruins. He had 10 points. So Logan liking it up in the final seasons.
He was like a Dave Andrechuk.
Mm.
Except Dave Andrechuk was good at one point.
Ooh, shots fired.
Well, Tom Fitzgerald I mean, come on, let's be honest. Tom Fitzgerald was a second line guy at the most.
93-94, he had 18 goals, career high for goals in the NHL. He did have 30 goals in the AHL though with the Springfield Indians. Teams that no longer exist. The Indians?
Before they were the Falcons.
Springfield
That's
still has a team.
racist. All right, Ryan, you need to go watch the Capitals choke.
Yeah, get out of here.
So thank you very much for joining us, dear listeners. This has been Champions and Challengers. And we'll see you next week when Ryan's really, really upset about what happened in the series.